Our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, dear listener. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. This radio station is also broadcasting live on its website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. While on that website, you click on the icon with the word Listen Live. We are also live on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. We are also live on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. Download any, look for Radio 1 FM 90. And as long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to this radio station from anywhere across this globe. Today, we'll be looking at a recent report which was published by UNDP, which suggests that Uganda has finally attained a middle income status. Now, the UNDP Human Development Index report released recently says that Uganda has attained a middle income status, which is in tandem with what the government had announced 2 years ago. The report showed that Uganda had made progress much better than her regional peers in improved services, especially health and educational, personal incomes, and reducing social inequalities. This report came at a time when many people have been complaining about lack of money in their pockets. Despite this situation, the government says that the economy is also rebounding. This was the same message which was articulated by the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development as it tabled the proposed budget for next financial year, 2024-2025, which amounts to 58.3 trillion shillings. The key priorities of this budget are peace and security, road maintenance and construction of strategic roads and a standard gauge railway. There is electricity transmission, wealth creation initiatives, funding of the social sectors, and manufacturing. The theme of this budget will be the full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. This evening, Professor Augustus Nwagaba, an international consultant on economic transformation, also managing consultant at Riv Consult International, will share his views on these issues. Good evening, and thank you very much for making time to be with us, Professor Nwagaba.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and good evening, our listeners of Radio 1 and our viewers.
How have you been, Professor? It's quite some time.
Yeah, it has been a while, but we have been just struggling like any other Ugandan, but we are still surviving. God has been good.
When a professor says they are struggling like any other Ugandan, it's something that is not understandable. Professors, high-class people, people are supposed to be doing well.
No, things are different, my dear. So we have been trying to survive, just like any Ugandan. And of course, since COVID, you know that since COVID, there is a certain word we do not now pronounce, which is thriving. We are now surviving, not thriving. I think we are going to talk about thriving much later. Yeah, but most Ugandans, since COVID-19, we have been focusing on surviving and not thriving. Maybe a very good, a very small group of people who can talk about thriving during this period. But majority of us, the issue is survival.
Right. Maybe we should not lose that point. What does that say about the state of the economy, Professor?
The state of the economy at macro level is that since COVID-19, the economy suffered the full brunt of what every other country in the world suffered. We know that, of course, the number of sectors crumbled, the tourism sector, education sector, and of course the issues of these sectors of transport, these suffered the full brunt of COVID-19. But after the government instituted measures which were able to curtail the spread of COVID-19, the economy rebounded, but of course there are still the majority of the population which is struggling to ensure that they can come to the levels that were pre-COVID. So generally, as we are speaking, many businesses are coming to terms with the post-COVID-19, and so we can not say that the businesses are doing well. What we can say is the businesses are struggling to come to the level where they were before COVID-19.
Well, what is taking us so long to actually get back to that level where people had some money and businesses were sustainable, like you said? What do you think is taking us so long, and what do we need to do maybe to move faster to where we were before COVID-19?
You know, the Ugandan economy is what we call a cash economy. You know, people go every morning, 90% of heads of households. What you call merea lero. People go and then they come with the kavera. It is not that you are having a business that is big enough and it is robust, and whatever risk it suffers, then it can come back again to original position. It is not as we can say you have a very big insurance company, and once it suffers a certain problem, then you are indemnified and the situation becomes normal. Or you have been having a hotel and this hotel has had problems, and once now the economy rebounds, then your hotel capacity also rebounds to 90%. The situation is not like that. The economy here is largely, first of all, the economy is largely service sector led, and of course these services, and majority of them, these telecoms and banks, they are also owned by foreigners. They are not indigenously owned, and so majority of us are workers who are working on merea lero. You do not
survival.
Have, exactly, for survival. You do not have a population here of more than 2%, where you can say they can suffer given a calamity, and then after 1 week they have rebounded. It is not there. So you all survive on a day-to-day basis. Majority of us are working on a subsistence level, and so it is important that on a daily basis you have means of livelihood.
All right. And that takes me to the other point. A few days ago, the UNDP did release the Human Development Index report, in which they actually indicated that this country is attaining a middle income status. First of all, what does that mean, even before I ask you whether you think we are there?
I was also pleasantly surprised. The reason being that, you see, we have two major indices. The first index is the what you call it, the Human Development Index. This index measures the welfare of the people, and it is the authority for this index is the United Nations. Is actually United UNDP. Now, when the index is being calculated or determined, we look at the following measures. The first one, we look at income. Second, we look at the distribution of that income. Third, we look at health of the population. And fourth, we look at the education, especially the retention of children in school. So it is a measure which looks, if you want, at the social indicators. And when it comes to income, it uses both income, but also uses income distribution, how that income is distributed. In other words, for it looks at welfare. Now, this index, the authority is United Nations. That's why you saw that Susan Ngonje Namono is our UNDP resident representative, and is the one who presents this report at Makerere with the Prime Minister, and my friend Barnabas Nawangwe, our Vice Chancellor, was present. Now, this index measures human development, and I think I'm very clear on that. When we measure it, we have a scale of 100, and this year it was 193 countries. I think last year it was 191 countries. And the way it does it, it measures the index. That this index of the Human Development Index, HDI, has got two values. The lowest value is 0. The highest value is 1. Every other country is in between those two. You are either 0 or 1. So the best country will be 1, the worst country will be 0. And Uganda is currently at 0.525. And it is number 159th out of 193 countries. The other year, last year, we were 166th out of 191 countries. That's why you heard the UN Reserve saying that we have moved 7 positions from 166th, country number 166, to country number 159, to 159th, out of 193 countries. And this is how we do it. Now, the middle income index, for it, they also divide countries into 4 categories also. Just like the other one, they use 4 categories. The first one is low income countries. These are countries whose per capita income, as we have been talking, per capita income is calculated by getting the country's GDP, or in Uganda, obugaga bwa Uganda mu mwaka gumu. So everybody who is doing business in Uganda's borders, and whether you are Muchiga, whether you are Nacholi, whether you are Karamajong, whether you are Chinese, whether you are Muzungu, whether you are an Indian, but you happen to have done the business in Ugandan borders in 1 year.
The total wealth.
That's how we calculate it.
In 1 year.
Anybody who did the business and exchanged money, we calculate it, and that value is currently about $48.6 billion. That's why we say that Uganda's GDP is $48.6 billion. Then you divide it, simple, by the total population of 47.6 million from UBOS. And that population which we use, people need to know, must be the population of Uganda as of 30th of June of every year. That's what the one we call the mid-year population. We use that because we don't want the population of January will be different from the population of December of the calendar year. Why? You know, you cannot. Because the mothers continue producing children, other people continue dying, and the only 2 variables that affect the population is death and birth.
But that measurement, that formula assumes that everybody in that population that you are taking into account is actually earning. Exactly,
that's what it does.
But is that a fair reflection?
It's not a fair index. But now, in the absence of not a very good indices, what do we do? So we use the per capita income, which measures the total GDP or every economic activity that took place in the borders of Uganda. Forget about Ugandans who are abroad, because that one is another index.
All right.
Because also you have Ugandans who are abroad. You also have abroad people who are here. That is now another index we call the GNI, the gross national income. But we use here we get the GDP, which is the businesses that took place here and they exchanged money. Total of them divided by the population, you get the per capita income, which is the indicator that now the World Bank uses. So the authority for calculating income status is the World Bank. It is not UNDP. And that's why I was also pleasantly surprised for the report by UNDP to allude to middle income. What the report of UNDP should have done was to talk about what you call the human development or the welfare of the people, but not income status. Income status, the authority, let me repeat it, is the World Bank. And the World Bank is going to do it. It is going to be, just get it from me, it will be between 1st to 10th of July.
All right.
That's when the World Bank will authoritatively present a report that endorses that Uganda has indeed, and actually we have, that indeed has reached the middle income status.
Have we in reality, Professor?
According to Uganda Bureau of Statistics, we have entered the middle income status. And also according to the UNDP resident representative, UN resident representative Susan, she was quoting a report also of the one. She was quoting.
I want to hear from you as a Ugandan, an expert in economic transformation and poverty reduction.
find every Ugandan as an individual, that every individual identifies with this. Why? Because these are macroeconomic indicators. How? These are indicators that we calculate using statistics. And of course, if we say per capita income, there is no way we can calculate per capita income of a village. Somewhere in Chijuguta parish where I come from, in Kabale, the city northern division. It is hard. So what we do is that the UBOS carries out a survey, and it is going to carry out a census now, and it is UBOS or Uganda Bureau of Statistics or the agencies in various countries that are mandated to do this. They will do two things. They will calculate gross domestic product, which we all know. They will now also, they are going to measure to conduct a national census. They will determine the population. They will divide the gross domestic product by the population, and the answer will be given. Actually, this answer has been, for your information, you see, when you want to reach the middle income status, you must attain a per capita income of more than $1,033 for 3 consecutive years. And UBOS has told us this has happened. That in fact the first one was 1,046. The second year was 1,097. The third year last year was 1,088. So since we have had 3 consecutive years, of which the per capita income, Kenneth, is more than 1,033, and this has been approved, and the World Bank accepts. Why the World Bank? Marks, but we say there is a teacher, this examination is a board which gives the exams to all schools, and it is UNEB which says people who are in grade 1 in mathematics are people who passed with this grade. You cannot say, for me as headmaster or head teacher of this school, I would use my own marks. That one is not accepted. So that's why we are waiting for July, and the World Bank is going to come clean and ratify and also endorse this figure that Uganda has reached. But I agree with you. Personally, I do not agree that this is a very good indicator. Why? Because people, how do we calculate it? People who engage in consumption, others who engage in investment, others who engaged in exports, other people who imported. Then we have government expenditure. So all those 5 categories of people who engage in those activities must be existing and engage in those activities. But the issue is not everybody engage in those activities. And so what you have is that my neighbor may not have engaged in the end of those activities, didn't buy anything, didn't export, didn't import, didn't invest, and also is not using any government facility, but it is also assumed that the per capita income of that person has improved. So we need another indicator, and I've been working with Minister of Local Government. I'm working on a different indicator.
I was about to ask you whether we can't come up with our own indigenous.
Now I'm coming up with a different one. It is local economic development, and we have advanced in looking at this. For us, we want to look at a village, see the facilities in this village, the products being produced in the village, where the markets are they selling, do they have a road, is there a school, are children going to school? And after we have looked at all these, we can say this village is better than the other village, and the person in this village is having a higher level of living than the other person. I think the local economic development led is more realistic, of course, than the per capita income, which is just an artificial measure. Be very convenient, but doesn't reveal much. It is just a number.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. My guest this evening is Professor Augustus Nwagaba, a renowned international consultant on economic transformation and poverty eradication. He's also the managing consultant at Reef Consult, which is also an international consultants firm on this particular issue. So our topic of discussion, we are looking at the state of the economy and also taking into account a report that says actually this country is finally attaining the middle income status. Now, Professor, one of the tools that is useful in terms of actually ensuring that there is transformation in this country and delivering the services that will eventually take us into the much anticipated middle income status is the national budget. Today, the national budget figures were tabled in Parliament. Our budget is now going to be, that is for next financial year, 2024-2025, 58.3 trillion shillings. There's always a discussion about these numbers, whether they are real or not, whether we are budgeting beyond our expectations, whether we need actually to, what they say, make your suit according to the size of the cloth that you have. Is this reality, this figure?
Yeah, our budget for next financial year is 58.3 trillion. The one we have been having in this financial year, which is ending in June, is 52.7. So we have increased to 58.3.
Around 6 trillion.
Yeah, increase. Now, a budget, as you all know, is a number. The reality is different. So, but it is good to budget. It is a financial control measure. We all have budgets, but one thing is that you may realize this budget in what technically call budget performance, and you may not realize this budget. But it's good to budget and then work according to the budget. You spend according to the budget, because this now becomes a financial control tool. A budget is an act. You know, the budget is any other law that we have. When the budget is read in Parliament, the one reading the budget is the President. The Minister of Finance is reading on behalf of the President. And what is happening is that the President is saying, we have this amount. If you're head of the family, you say, we have this amount, and please, we don't want anybody to expect anything beyond this. That's what it should be. And it is a law, just like any other bill. It is the budget, the reading of the budget. The Minister of Finance is reading a bill like any other bill.
But is the head of the family actually telling us the truth? Do we have that 58.3 trillion? Do we have it?
Yeah, because
does it reflect the size of our economy and what is actually being collected?
What we usually do in all these budgets that we have had, including the last, but this one we are implementing up to 30th of June, is that we do not have sufficient domestic revenue to support the budget. We have got the budgets Uganda is currently implementing are what you call deficit budgets. The expenditure of government
is much
more than
what
the domestic
collect.
Revenue from Uganda Revenue Authority and the other sources, other non-tax sources. So you get the tax revenue plus non-tax sources. When you add them up, they cannot even be 30 trillion out of the 52.7 we need. So what will happen for our listeners is that the government will borrow, and the government can borrow domestically by issuing what you call government papers. These are treasury bills for short-term money supply management, monetary policy management, or long-term investments. And these are bonds, 1, 3 years, 5 years, 10, 15-year, 20-year bonds. And the way government does that is, of course, through the central bank, and people will come and buy bonds, and then the government will raise money for infrastructure, for any other investment. But also government can sell treasury bills and be able to sort out just short-term expenditures. So government will borrow domestically. But also, too, government will borrow from external sources, especially when you want to engage in very serious investments, energy, like Karuma Dam, $1.7 billion. There's no way you can borrow that domestically. These electricity generation dams, you want to make these roads.
Standard gauge railway.
All those you must borrow externally from external sources. So the budget, Kenneth, is a document, is a number which shows that you are going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. But in terms of Uganda, the way we are, especially given the infrastructure deficit, the things you want to do, it's not enough.
All
and
right.
you cannot say, I'm not going to do them, let me, even if you're at home, there's a time you want to, for example, construct an apartment, and it so happens that you don't have sufficient money.
All
so
right.
what you will do, you will begin, and then you will reach in the middle and borrow,
All right.
and be able to complete, and then you get tenants, and if you're a very good financial manager, then the tenants will pay you,
All
and
right.
you pay back.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. That's the voice of Professor Augustus Nwakaba, an international consultant on economic transformation, poverty eradication, who is speaking to us about the economy. We are going to go for a break. When we return, we'll hear from Professor Nwakaba about the limited resources that we have. Are we using them very well? We'll also be looking at some of the key priorities that have been highlighted in the next budget. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us. This is Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Today we are looking at the state of the economy, looking at the UNDP report, which says we are at middle income status, but we're also looking at the national budget. And in fact, my guest, Professor Nwakaba, has gone through the issue of the UNDP report, looked at the issues therein, and the fact that in July this year, the World Bank is actually likely to declare Uganda a middle income status. He says he may not agree with the formula being used, but that is the international arrangement index that is used actually to arrive at some of these things. But Professor, let's now get deep into this budget. Like you said, we have limited resources. We have to borrow, so we have to be strategic in how we are actually spending these resources. Let's look at the key priorities of this budget: peace and security, road maintenance and construction of strategic roads, and the standard gauge railway, electricity transmission, wealth creation initiatives, social sector financing, and manufacturing. And the theme is full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. Have we got our priorities right, Professor Nwakaba?
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and our viewers and listeners of Radio 1. The budget, as we have said and also seen, is that it is a statement of intent. Government is saying these are the areas where we intend to invest. And what you need to first see is whether the budget speaks to the priorities of the country. This is where the population should be looking at. And that's what we have said, the same as head of the household. The amount of money you are earning, have you allocated it to the specific areas that have priority? You know, when you look at Uganda now, what is the priority? Number one is that we have infrastructure deficit, isn't it? Our transport is still the most expensive. Why? Because including oil and these petroleum products, we must transport them on land. And you cannot continue doing that, because this makes the cost of fuel products, diesel and petrol, very, very expensive. So it would be good to transport these products through some means that are cheap enough, that are affordable, and then will make the cost of petrol and diesel affordable and also less costly. And once you solve that, you know, once you have petrol and diesel sorted out, then of course, you know, this normally cascades through all the other economic activity. That's why, you know, when you have inflation rising from the imported, very high cost of imported fuel products, petrol and diesel, then you're going to have inflation that cuts across. This is what we call imported inflation, actually like the one we have been having. Otherwise, Uganda, we have food, we have this. We shouldn't be having a lot of food inflation. We shouldn't be having a lot of costs of matoke. Imagine the cost of matoke. It should be 10,000, 8,000. This is what they give them, the farmers. generally on average. But by the time the bunch reaches in Kampala, 30,000, 40,000. Where has the additional cost come from? Transport. The reason is transport. How? Because of the cost of fuel products and bad roads. The vehicles cannot reach in these areas. Why? Because the roads are poor, and then nobody can put the vehicles to such bad roads. So it is important that we continue investing in infrastructure. And now we have tourism roads. Like for us who are coming from Kabale, we have been arguing with the government, the Lake Bunyonyi road. You know, that road has been in the budget for the last 10 and so years, and not still funded. Every year it's a non-funded activity, but very highly prioritized, but non-funded.
This week I had the sector minister, Tom Butime, actually saying that tourism roads are high on agenda next financial year.
So tourism roads are very, very high on agenda. Uganda, despite COVID-19, we have had still $1 billion US dollars, still the pre-COVID. We haven't
from the tourism
because
sector.
It was $1.7 billion. The pre-COVID earnings from tourism alone, financial year 20, to be very specific, financial year 2018-19 was $1.7 billion. And I was very happy that it has gone back to about $1 billion this year, which is still lower than the pre-COVID period. And that's tourism alone. But you cannot now have the tourism sector, which was able to attract 1.2 million people. And by the way, Kenneth, now we are ahead of Kenya. We have attracted more people than Kenya.
Actually, the statistics showed that even we are getting tourists from Kenya.
I'm telling you. So, and this is despite very poor roads, especially in these tourism facilities. So it is important that we, with the infrastructure deficit, we continue budgeting for infrastructure. And of course, peace and security, of course, this is a premier factor. It is sacrosanct. Peace and security are sacrosanct for any economic activity. There's no economic activity that can take place without peace and security. So you have now, of course, what we have been arguing with the government is to ensure that the Human Capital Development Program, you know, these days we are on programs. We have 20 programs. Is that education and training, and particularly the training of skills mix development, hands-on skills development, should be taking a lion's share in the education sector. This is also the issue that the budget should be speaking to, such that when you have been giving example of China, the way China does its thing, every child of whatever level of education from China is a graduate who is hands-on and is employable. Why? Because the government invested heavily in skills mixed development of whatever level of the child.
All right.
Primary, secondary, tertiary, the child is well equipped with employable skills. And so when you put now money in education, the question should be, what is the content?
What is the content
of this education that we are spending this money on? And for me, the content, if the content is skills mixed development, equipping these children with hands-on skill, then the money is being spent.
Actually, one of the things we expect in the education sector next year is what they call the compulsory free education that government is going to implement at primary and secondary level. That's one of the key reasons why the education sector budget is actually increasing. But before this budget was actually tabled in Parliament, the Secretary to Treasury, rather than Govi, did share some insights about what government intends to do. So I'm going to read out some of the issues he put across. And you tell me whether we are actually clicking as a country in terms of seeing how things are going on. He said, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development has deepened fiscal consolidation, which entails increased revenue mobilization, reduced borrowing, and rationalization of government expenditure, especially on consumptive areas such as workshops, travels, etc. It says more investments will be made next financial year in money-making activities, including value addition, wealth creation, job creation, UDB, UDC, PDM, Emyoga, women and youth funds, among others. Government will prioritize completion of ongoing projects as opposed to starting new ones. What does that tell you, Professor?
Is that this is from the outset, the spirit and later of the budget is positive, because the ministry is telling you it is concentrating on value addition. It is focusing on industrialization. It is stopping wastage of resources in workshops, in travel. You see, you have seen in the parliament what travel budget with the havoc travel budget has caused in the last month. And we were entertained, the whole country was entertained through the budget of parliament of travel. You see, by the way, by both the members of the ruling party as well as the opposition. So travel, and this really has been understood by the public as the real wastage. What do we lose by not traveling? What do we lose by not having these workshops? And I know countries, as you know, I work in quite a number of countries. I know countries which stopped these travels and directed the money to infrastructure. And one example, let me tell you, is Tanzania. I was in Dar es Salaam last week. I was in Dar es Salaam.
You can attend meetings via infrastructure, which is online
meetings.
So you invest more in the internet.
I was in Dar es Salaam, and now they are working. I think Dar es Salaam now is working on the electric rail line. Electric rail line infrastructure in Dar es Salaam is very fascinating. Where are they getting the money? By cutting on wastage expenditure in such things of workshops, travels. So I entirely agree with my colleague Ramadan.
There was a development in Parliament today as the budget was actually being tabled. A revelation that the budget of Parliament had been cut by 50%. The Speaker didn't like it, and a section of MPs also were up in arms. Do you think it's a good idea to cut the budget of Parliament in light of what you've been saying?
Not Parliament only, Kenneth, but across government. And if you begin with the Parliament, the reason I think why to have to begin with the Parliament is because of the entertainment that we have had from Parliament, travels, someone who travels for this number of days. The days are not the ones, allegedly. The days are not the ones, and so on. So I think the reason why the President had to begin, I think, with the Parliament is because it's a Parliament which has been exhibited. But this, I think, is an issue that cuts across government or MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. And what you need to look at is really wastage. There is something we call scale of preference in economic theory and practice. Now, a scale of preference is a list of the things that you must do, followed by the ones you may not do, then followed by the ones you really may need to do them. Don't lose anything much by not doing them. So we need to see what is the scale of preference. Is peace and security, followed by infrastructure, because the road must also be constructed in a peaceful environment, followed by education and training, human capital. Then others, these other things can you know, there is a country I've been giving as an example, Mauritius from 1985 to around, for 25 years, it was making a plan of 5 years. They will have our national development plan in a band of 5. And their budget, for them, their budget was always on one major thing. They say this year we are going to focus on this. It is called a strategic flagship budgeting approach. You strategically flagship a sector. And they started, you know, Mauritius started by sugar. They went textiles. They then flagshipped banking, flagshipped ICTs. They are now on knowledge
in Vision 2040, the Ugandan one, we also talk about flagship projects.
Where I was there, I was the main consultant. We talked about flagshipping.
What happened?
The economy. I think what happened is when for us, what we did the document and completed, and the strategic flagship planning approach was the model to be used. But I think when the ministers again went into a retreat, because for us now we stopped there. We are not cabinet ministers. So when we handed over, then of course what I suspect, each minister now feared. Now, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? What is my ministry? I think ministries now started fighting for the small pie that was there. But what Mauritius did was to say, in these 5 years, and it was 5 years, not even a budget, it was a development plan.
The strategy is to
focus
all
and
the
concentrate
resources
effort
in that particular area,
then given the resources you have,
and then move on to
you
another
said
aspect.
you cut the cloth according to size.
All right.
Concentrate effort, make sure, get the right thing, do it, and
move on.
Next year move on. The other year move on.
Instead of
now spreading your
spreading the resources, thin resources,
and eventually nobody does anything that can be seen. So what do Ugandans want? Do you want to continue spreading all these small resources we have thinly, or you want us to concentrate effort on one thing, whether it's education and training? We concentrate on education and training for 5 years, and we know we have done that. Then another 5 years, we concentrate on something else. Like we have done on, for example, Kennedy, the way we have done on infrastructure, particularly energy. Do you know that our energy generation has improved, because of concentration of effort, has improved from 250 megawatts to 1,047 megawatts. Now, we have a surplus. Do you know we have a demand of 847 with a surplus of 589 megawatts. So we have got a surplus of more than 500 megawatts. The demand is only 800, but we have over 1,047.
But also what is surprising is that most people are not actually on the grid. That's what we get. There's some places in this country. Of course, that one is again different.
That's administration.
But that's very important.
In terms of technical, we have more than enough electricity generation. How did it come? By government focusing on that. And if you do that for another 5 years on something else, another 5 years on something else, that's why countries can transform faster than all the time spreading yourself thin. And by the time you finish 20 years, you cannot see what you have done. So the Ugandans must choose what exactly you want to do.
All right. Prof, let's get feedback from the listeners. And I'll begin with Drakumani, who is listening to us all the way from Arua. He says, I'm really not happy with the people who authored this document. That's the UNDP report. He says, it's a mockery. Just go here in Kampala Street and you will know the level of income the people are in. Extend it deep into the villages, you will cry. It's the few, less than 1% of the total population who have attained that level. He says, I'm just perplexed with this. That is his comment there, Drakumani thing, saying he's perplexed by this particular presentation in that particular report by UNDP. We have another comment here. Good evening, Spectrum. One of the problems that is diminishing our economy is because money is not circulating properly in Uganda. Most of our people like to deal with big companies and big names when it comes to goods and service and trade. No one recognizes the common man who deals on the same goods and services. We have to change our mindsets so that money can be in circulation to reach the common man. That's Anthony listening in from Kibuli. He thinks money is not circulating to the common man and something needs to be done at that level. We have a comment from Francois. Prof, what is your take on taxation to prosperity, and what advice would you give URA on this notion or the decision makers on taxation? How does political patronage affect prosperity in your opinion? That's a comment from Francois there. We have another comment coming in from AAF who says, aren't workshops an effective way of dissemination of public information, e.g. PDM information to beneficiaries? Otherwise, what's the best way if workshops are not effective? That's AF there with that comment. Another one coming in from Wilson Bikakanga who says, if we have that surplus of power, why is power too costly and not available to all people? That's Wilson Bikakanga Muyenga there with that comment. Chris Kasaija writes in and says, budget of parliament, going by the results-based funding, parliament's budget should in fact be cut by a quarter of the current one. Secondly, as Ugandans, we should raise up in arms until the parliament is reduced to one representative per district. That's the issue of the cost of public administration. Another comment, Ben, it's politicians who are in the middle income through bribes and corruption. It's the politicians who are in the middle income through bribes and corruption. That's a comment there from Ben who says the middle income status reflects only the politicians. Are they the ones in that 2% you talked about, Professor? And then we have another comment from Ismail who says, good evening, Professor should explain the foreign domination of the economy. Manufacturing, banking, mining, big farming, etc. The locals are nowhere. Look at oil now. The locals are getting peanuts in these projects. Babu Bubu is for foreigners that are based in Uganda. So Bubu has become a tool for foreigners who are based here in Uganda. Prof, those are some of the comments that have come in. Very quickly, let's run through them and give the listener the responses.
Well, thank you very much, our listeners of Radio 1. And of course, for us as fishermen, you would cast the net, you don't know whether you are going to catch the fish. I'm very happy that we have been able to communicate with the people. Let me begin with the last one. The structure of the economy, the structure of Uganda's economy is that the GDP, which we talked about, is from services sector. The services sector contributes more than 50% of the entire GDP. So bugaga bwa Uganda buva mu services. That is banking, transport, if you want a little bit of tourism, and also telecoms. But Kenneth, the population which is engaged in these sectors, services, is less than 10%. Now the contradiction is that the sector which should be employing people is not the one that is doing so. Because the agricultural sector, which is employing over 70% of the population, contributes only less than a quarter of the GDP. And
I'm saying in the allocations here as a priority, agriculture is not there.
So that's the problem. So the people are heavily engaged in the sector, which is not the one that is contributing more to GDP. What does that tell you? It tells you that that sector is not highly productive. So we have rudimentary equipment, rudimentary technology. We still have a hand hoe as the tool for using in agriculture. The land is a problem.
Water-based, rain-fed agriculture.
Rain-fed, no irrigation.
Pests and diseases.
Pests and diseases, and so on. So because of that, those structural hindrances, you have very low agricultural output. And so despite the people being engaged in agriculture at 70%, it is still not able to contribute more than a quarter to GDP. So it is a very big contradiction. That's why you need structural transformation. You need people to move from agriculture to industry. And this is what countries do. You don't need many people in agriculture. You need a few who are highly productive, but the majority should be in industry.
To produce, to feed the population. So people should not be looking at survival.
No, they should be looking at agriculture as commercial, industrialization, value addition, and commercialized agriculture. Then you have Bubu, which is Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, is important because if you continue buying products from abroad, you are doing two things. First of all, you are creating employment to the other people, and you are killing our domestic currency. Because when you buy things from abroad, you are using dollars, you are not using Uganda shillings. So you are exchanging Uganda shillings and donating money to those people, and you are not creating employment. You have got the middle income is for politicians, and that's what we have said, is that the per capita income is the average. So if you are not involved in economic activity, if you are not involved in something which is earning, and you have people have left politicians, they would be the people who should be in the politics. You have left no politicians to selected a few, and majority of the people are saying they cannot manage the dirt there and so on. So who is going to manage that dirt? You go there, and I've been there myself. Go there and see what happens. Other than that, you are going to have a few people dominating this activity, and when for us we calculate the per capita income, we are saying everybody is artificially gaining. You have got surplus power. As we have said, we are now at 1047 megawatts, and the surplus is about over 500. The reason, Kenneth, is because of low industrialization.
Consumption of power.
Yes, most of the power we have here is for household. It's for household. But if we had industries, like iron and steel, this power is not enough, cannot even run about 2 branches of iron and steel. But because of lack of industry, is that the power seemingly is more. Why? Because of low demand for this. And taxation is high. That's why we are pleading with the government to ensure that they can have a tax regime that is promoting businesses, not stifling businesses. Workshops, we are saying workshops can be online.
All right. We already went through that.
You don't need to have workshops that are physical. And the poor man who is not gaining from this and being recognized by government, especially in bidding, this is true. In many cases, we have had people, even our clients here, prioritizing the foreign firms.
All right.
And this is not good for Bubu. Buy Uganda, build Uganda means also bidders, consultants, contractors. Let's first give priority to Ugandans.
All right.
And then when we can't, then we can go to foreigners.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Augustus Nwagaba, for your insights this evening. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for being part of the show. Tomorrow, 2 hours of analysis of the top events of the week on Spectrum Extra. Make a date with us. Up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Jr.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.